All right, all right. Good afternoon. I am just wanting to go ahead and get started. Um, Waiting for people to start logging in. Hopefully you can see my screen. Please let me know if you can't. Please let me know if you can't hear me. But let's go ahead and get started. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today for our webinar that's going to be talking a lot about franchise success and how to go into franchising and things to consider to make sure that you're successful. So we'll jump in here. So I am your host today. We'll get started. I am Cynthia Mora. I am located right here in Houston. I'm a franchise specialist along with Diana Tronson. If you're here today, you either received an email or saw something on LinkedIn from either Diana or I. So thank you so much. Just my background, I'm not going to spend too much time, but really, I'm like a lot of you and a lot of my clients, had a dream of owning my own business and spent many years, 26 years in marketing and sales. I spent a lot of time in radio advertising. It was fun. Met lots of famous people. Can't really say anything other than I just got tired of having a boss. So I started my marketing consulting business because that's what I knew in 2010. And it was great. I achieved my goals that I was looking for. And about 4.5 years into it, I started looking for something else, a franchise. And that's actually how I found FranNet, because FranNet is a franchise. I always say that I'm a native Houstonian, and I'm going to shut my door because I can hear my dog. I say I'm a native Houstonian because I think that's important when you're working with somebody regarding franchising or starting a business locally to be able to understand the landscape in the particular area. So we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today, a lot of information, mainly talking about, business ownership, how to kind of which option is a good fit. Franchise, startup, buy an existing business, the different options for businesses, what categories, what demographics, the risks and the costs in franchising, and then some myths and facts that we'll kind of go through a lot that most people that I've worked with have had in their mind, and then what is the best option for you and how to go about finding that. A little bit about FranNet. So we are a 35-year-old international franchise consulting company. We have been doing this a long time. We're not only in Houston and Texas, but we're all over the United States and Canada as well. So we have over 100 locally based consultants like myself and Diana. We're also, and have been for many years, national partners with the small business development centers. And that if you're looking at starting a business or you are already a business owner, the SBDC is just a great resource. They provide consulting. They have lots of data that you can use. It can help you decide, about business ownership and competitive landscape, things like that. We work with them with their consultants, and whenever they're working with a client that is wanting to find a franchise, we work together with them, we help them. And we've also educated them and provided some tools for them as well for understanding franchising. So we're the leader in the industry. We believe in education and understanding, our clients, educating our clients. And something that I always, like to point out is that our services are free to you, the client. We are like a headhunter. So if one of our clients decides to buy a business, a franchise business, then the fees are covered by the franchisor. As I mentioned, like a headhunter, right? We know what the franchisors are looking for in successful franchisees. And so we match our clients to the opportunities. So before I kind of move on, I always like to cover this because I use these words a lot. So whenever I refer to a franchisor, that's referring to the company that's selling the franchisees, selling to the franchisees. So they're the headquarters. And then when I say franchisee, those are people who have purchased the right to open a business under the franchisor. They're the small business owner who has paid the fee to have the right to become an owner of said business. Okay, so moving on. So what do we do at FranNet? We are matchmakers. We really spend a lot of time getting to know our clients, understanding what their goals are in business ownership, what their background has been as they've had a corporate job, understanding what those skills are that they naturally are good at, and then understanding their financials as well. That's a big part of this process for us when we're helping our clients, understanding their financials. What do they want? How much money do they want this business to make? How much money do they want to risk for buying the business? So all of those aspects are key and helpful for us to understand. And then we take that information and then we match our clients to franchisors that we've pre-screened. So we're very particular with the franchise companies, the franchisors that we would match to our clients. We do a very thorough vetting process. One thing that I let people know is we don't work with all the franchise companies that are out there. We are very selective. We have hundreds of them, but we have gone through a process that we have our clients go through as well. So we're very selective. We don't sell franchises at FranNet. We really work closely with the candidates that are looking to buy a business, making sure that they are doing all the steps to allow them to achieve success. I mean, that's really the goal here, not just for our clients, but also for us as well. And so when people are looking for a franchise, the first thing they do is, what do we all do? We go to Google, right? And we begin the search, and best new franchise in Houston, best new pet franchise, fill in the blank, right? And I kind of equate that to, it's like the vending machine. Whatever it serves up is not necessarily going to be maybe the right fit for you in different ways. A lot of times what you're going to find when you do that is you're going to see directories and portals that are paying to be on that page. And so the options that you see may not be the best fit, but they have paid to be there. And so what happens oftentimes is people start pursuing ideas that resonate with them emotionally, as opposed to what makes sense for their goals, their budget, their background. Now, when you're looking at a business, I think it's really important to kind of step back. And that's what we're doing when we're working with our clients, when we're educating our clients about how to make a sound investment, is you want to think through, what is your purpose for buying a business? When I look at these different blocks here, for me, it was about having more control of my schedule, control of my life, and having success for myself, right? Because when you're building something for yourself, it's very different, but it's different for everybody. I've worked with so many people who've been laid off, and I've heard from them, no more layoffs. From others, I've heard, I work 60 hours a week, I'm traveling, I'm missing important dates for my family, birthday parties, games, et cetera, et cetera. And really now I want to have more control. I want to have more flexibility in my schedule, but I also want my time and my effort to go to building something for me and my family that maybe I can pass off to my kids. So it's different for everybody, but think about that. What is it for you? A lot of times, people have many great reasons to want to start a business, but they don't because all these reasons that we see on the screen. We think a job is safer. We think, oh, we've got to wait for the economy. We've got to wait for fill in the blank, the pandemic to be over. There's so many reasons that we are afraid. And so we think also that it takes a lot of money to start a business and run a business. Knowledge, when I started my business, I heard that all the time. Oh, I'm be nice, but I don't think I'm that entrepreneur. Skills, we think we have to have specific talents or skills. I can't tell you how many people have asked me, I think I want to get my MBA before I start my business. And I'm thinking to myself, that isn't necessary or required. I've had and worked with many people who have had their MBA and tell me their MBA does not compare to what they learn in the real world and actually running a business. But ultimately, when I'm working with people and I ask them, if I could guarantee that you could start a business and be successful, would you do it? And the answer is always yes, right? So what I like to then focus on is evaluating risk. So working for someone else, we think a job is safer, and it actually maybe is at the beginning. I work with people all over Houston, and I have for years in outplacement offices. And the people that I'm seeing there are not the people who are starting in their career. They're the people who have been there for 20, 30 years, who are extremely experienced, very knowledgeable, and it didn't secure them their job. The longer you have a job, actually, the riskier it becomes. When companies are wanting to cut costs, they need efficiency, right? So one person that is making a very high salary, who maybe has more expenses as it relates to insurance and things like that, that's going to be the first place they go, right? Now, let's look at a business. When you think of a business, it's risky. It is absolutely riskier at the beginning. When you first start your business, it is scary, it's risky, but the longer you have your business, the safer it becomes. Both of my businesses, I started my consulting business and then my Franet business 5 years later. And I can tell you that the longer I had each of them, the easier it was to get clients. The more business I've gotten through referrals. So it just you become more of an expert. You gain that expertise. So something just to think about. Now, risk. We have to think about that. And I think it's important to think through it. So there are what we have seen, and this has been, over longer than I've been in the franchising industry, but we have seen businesses thrive in all economic conditions. And, businesses have been able to grow during downturns, during recessions. And what we've actually have the privilege of seeing now is how well do they fare with the pandemic, right? So something no one ever saw coming. But we have seen so many different categories of business that have thrived and continue to thrive no matter what's thrown at them. And the reason for that is because there are demographics that are continuing to grow. If you think about senior care, we have seen so many clients that have done extremely well building a senior care business. I mean, it's not necessarily right for everybody, but for the right people, it can be a phenomenal business. Baby boomers are continuing to grow at 10,000 seniors retiring a day. I heard a statistic that said that I did this presentation specifically on senior care franchises. And by 2034, there are going to be more people that are 65 and older than are 18 and younger. That demand isn't going anywhere. It's continuing to grow. Now, the services could be, even residential repair. We're seeing franchises in that sector where they're going into the home, making it safer for people to age in place. And that is a franchise, actually. Cleaning services, that was something that actually did very well during COVID. You wouldn't expect that, right? But people were home. their whole families were home, working from home, and more people were looking for cleaning services, not only for, just making the home tidy, but also because of, they wanted things sterilized and cleaned more often. Disinfecting became more important in the home. And so, cleaning services are great. Those are for the right people, of course. Monday through Friday businesses, if you're good at leading teams, it's great. And, we've seen a lot of success, but it has to make sense for the individual. What we also have heard from clients that are in the sector is that, most of their clients are dual income, and, they're exchanging money for time. They're willing to pay for those things that allow them to have more freedom and more time. Also, they're seeing that younger people who have kind of grown up where, they have had a cleaning lady, now have that expectation in their lives to have that. And, it can vary in how often and things like that, but really, really good business. Other essential services. We're in Houston. If your car breaks, you're going to fix it. Damage restoration, that's going to always thrive in Houston. Really anywhere, but of course we have the extra unfortunate floods and flood situations sometimes. So when that happens, it's just crazy demand for that service. But even without that, there's tons of opportunity. I had a client that had a restoration business. When they started their restoration business, when they came back for training, they got a job that was huge, and they had to actually get other franchisees to help them. But it was a retirement center, and somebody had left the water running and it flooded the whole second floor. So really thinking through the demographics and the demand for the services is important. Sign companies is something else, whether it's retail locations that need signs. Everybody needs a sign. They're outside signs, indoor signs. It's endless, the demand for that, and that's not going away either. Then there's commercial cleaning. Again, something that we actually saw grow because of the disinfecting services and the need for that in commercial locations. And then there's always business to business. People don't think about the fact that franchising, for example, does have business coaching. And that there's always a need for that. Small businesses may not be able to afford the departments, but they need the expertise. And so they can hire people in various areas, whether it's digital marketing, staffing, helping find employees, sales employee training. I mean, Franet is a franchise, and we coach people also. So those are things to really think through when you're looking at businesses. What is the demand? What are the demographics? Not just nationally, but also in the local area that you're starting your business. So there's different ways to go about starting a business. You have that great idea, like you see on Shark Tank. You start something from scratch. I started something from scratch. You can buy an existing business, which is another option. Even in franchising, there are resales that happen, and then you can buy a brand new franchise. And so we're going to talk through some of the different advantages and disadvantages. Now, we'll start with starting a business from scratch. You have that great idea. I'm always amazed on Shark Tank that you see people with these very clever ideas, and they're willing to put everything on the line. And there's a lot of advantages to that. You have total control. You're calling all the shots. You're making all the decisions. You have a new idea or a new product that you want to develop. You can do that. There's no predetermined rules. There is a large upside, especially if you get a deal from one of the sharks. And you can build a business from your passions. Now, I've had a startup, and so I can really appreciate the advantages, but every time I read these, I also see them as disadvantages, and I'll tell you why. And you see this a lot in small businesses. It's very difficult to grow and scale something unless you're very good at creating systems. And you got to be able to create systems in order for it to run without you involved in every piece of that. And that's not always something that people are good at, and there can be learning curves when it comes to that. So there is limited financial options. It's not easy to go to the bank and say, I have this great idea, where it's financeable. And there's a slower ramp up. When I, think about, the runway for me to profitability, when I started my business, I had to come up with a logo. I had to come up with all the marketing pieces. I had to build a website, get the content. There was a lot that needed to be developed before I could even go and find my first client. Oh, and I didn't say this, but there is a higher failure rate, and I'll show you that in a minute. And that is why there are fewer limited financial options. Now you combine an existing business, same thing. You have total control. There's some cash flow where you can actually, actual financial results you can take to the bank, and that can be attractive to lenders. There's a market established. They have clients, they have customers, they've got employees, or it could be systems in place. Owner financing is an option. Now, disadvantages here is really being able to determine that cash flow. A lot of times, small business owners aren't the best bookkeepers, and depending on how they run their financials, it can be really difficult to understand that. There could be bad will, and they're not going to necessarily share that with you. It may be overpriced, and I would say that it is always overpriced. And I think I know why. Having a startup, you think that there is value in that sweat equity, and there's not. It is all about the dollars and cents. If you buy a new business, is the owner going to be there and support you through the transition? And if you run into problems, will they be there to help? There could be hidden seller motives, and they're not necessarily going to share that with you. Employee defection can be an issue. Sometimes, people, once they know that a business is for sale, they're like, okay, this is a good time for me to go look for something else. Who knows what they're going to be like? And then there's a higher debt service when you're buying something that is already existing. And also, I'd like to point out too that the reason that a lot of times you do find owner financing and buying an existing business is because banks are extremely critical when it comes to financing an existing business. And so they have extremely high criteria when it comes to financing, banking an existing business. Now, buying a franchise is, what I specialize in. So the advantages are you have name recognition, license, trademark, proven business systems, not just, at the beginning, but ongoing. You have training and support. I've seen so much in terms of this, and I've seen it even grow. I mean, I see some franchisors will provide an actual coach that's going to meet with the new franchisee every week to look at numbers, help them determine, how to look at KPIs, things like that. Sometimes they come into the market and help you research real estate. It's very in depth what I see in terms of good franchise support. There's a lower failure rate, which is why there are more financing options, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. There is something called the disclosure document, and that is a huge advantage, and we'll talk more in depth about that. But franchising is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, and because of that, every franchisor must provide a disclosure document, and that is very informative. You're also buying into a franchise family. That I didn't think was important when I first started my business, when I first started my startup, and I really got to understand the value of it in FranNet. You have not only your headquarters support, but you have other franchisees that are a source of support. So that's been extremely, extremely valuable. And then the disadvantages are there's fewer industry options. There are structured operating systems, and some it's very structured. And then, it depends. Some are looser. But there's territory restrictions. You can only buy and operate business in a particular area of town. You can only sell their products or their services. There's ongoing royalty payments. That's also something that some people see it as a disadvantage. And we'll talk more about that too, but honestly, I've changed my opinion on that. But royalties are collected by the franchisor. And that's I see anywhere from 5 to 10%. Now, the different options that we covered, there are statistics, and this is something that's you can look at SBA.gov, and they know this because they do a lot of the financing, and so they know default rates. So starting a business from scratch, after 5 years, there is a 50% success rate. Buying existing business is a little higher, goes up to 62% after 5 years. Buying a franchise is 92% success rate over a 5-year period of time. So there's something in that, and we're going to talk a little bit about why that might be. So a franchise is a license to use a name, trademarks, products, business systems in exchange for the initial franchise fee that if you've looked for franchises, have seen the franchise fee, and then those ongoing royalties that I talked about. So a franchise is set up with the franchise headquarters, where you support the headquarters supports the franchise operators, and then the franchise operators are operating in their local market, supporting their customers. So we talked about the franchise disclosure document, and we say FDD for short. You're going to hear that if you do look at a franchise, they'll refer to that as an FDD. And because it is a regulated industry by the Federal Trade Commission, this document has to be provided to the government, submitted every year and updated, but also to any candidate that is considering a franchise. And so you're going to see they make it easy. They have kind of a boilerplate of information that has to be submitted. You're going to see the time and business of the franchisor. You're going to get to know their experience of the management team. How long have they been in business? What's their background? Have they built or have experience in franchising? I think that's very important. You can see if they personally have had any bankruptcies. I think that's important. That hasn't always been in there, but I think it's when you think about this is a partnership, and you're kind of tethered to the franchisor for a period of time. It's good to know, how good are they at managing even their personal finances, right? So you can see if there's been any litigation of the franchisor against the franchisor by franchisees, by customers, and also if they have sued anyone, something that's really good to know. We're very particular about who we work with. We don't want to see litigation. But if there is some litigation, it will be disclosed in the FDD, and you'll see some type of kind of explanation, general overview of it. You will also see the total investment, all the costs that are related to opening that franchise. You'll see the franchise fee, if there's any, all the other fees, if there's equipment, supplies, how much do they expect you to spend in advertising, leases, all insurance, everything that is required, and that, they're seeing and they're experiencing for their franchisees to open. And that also includes working capital. It usually includes anywhere from 2 months. I've seen up to 6 months of working capital included in the total investment. Royalties, how are they collected? Are they collected on, do you have to get to a certain level of sales before they start collecting royalties, before maybe they increase the royalties? Whatever it is, it's going to be very clear and detailed in the FDD. The franchise contract is in there, the obligations of the franchisors, and how they support the franchisees. That's going to be clearly defined. And there's also information on how the franchisee, what the expectation is of the franchisees. So if there's any type of requirement for sales achievements, things like that, that's going to be detailed. You'll also see the territory. Not only is it going to be kind of the definition of the territory, but how is it protected? How is it defined? How many households, things like that. You'll see the listing and contact information for current franchisees, but also past franchisees. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that But that's going to be really key, and it is a key time for my clients when they're doing due diligence. And you'll also see earnings claims. So earnings claims is the financial performance representation that we call the item 19. And the way it's shown is going to be different from one franchise to another, but it gives you an idea of the gross sales and the potential revenue numbers. Something I tell my clients, though, is you can't rely on that to make a determination if a business can be profitable or not. Really, have to talk through how to go about doing a very thorough due diligence to understand, what are the net numbers. Franchisors, because and also because it's regulated by the Federal Trade Commission, they can't share they can't make promises on how much money you can make. And they can't share the franchisees' actual net numbers as well. So the financial statements are also included of the franchisor. It's important to see. I always tell my clients, you want to know, are they financially healthy? Do they have the money to either, if they're a newer franchise, to support that growth and the scalability? And so, all that information is included. Now, manager policy is in there because usually a business that is run more on a semi-absentee basis, where you kind of keep your day job and you need a manager, that information is going to be included there as well. Renewal, termination, and transfer policies. And that's something that I tell my clients, you really want to think through, what do you want this business to do for you in the long term? What is your exit strategy? And make sure that it aligns with what the franchisor allows. All franchisors have a length of time for the agreement. And so when the time is up, and you want to exit, or maybe you want to renew, all of that information is going to be detailed in the franchise disclosure document. Is there a fee to renew? Can you transfer or sell this to a family member? Some franchisors have language in there that don't allow for that. So it's important to read through this entire document because it's all listed in there. So I hit on this earlier about the due diligence and how important it is. When you're wanting to make sure that you're being smart about your franchise investment, you really want to do a thorough due diligence. And what's interesting is that with franchising, you have so many more data points. You can, as I mentioned, call and speak to franchisees that are currently running a business. And you can talk to as many as you want. You can ask them questions that you are not really allowed and the franchisor can't answer. But you can ask the franchisees. You can ask them questions like, how is the training? How is the support? How do they help you with your marketing? How much is your lease? What are you paying your employees? I always tell my clients to ask, how much money did you make in year one? When did you get to a break even? How long did it take? It's important to understand that before you go into something. I always like people to ask, would you do it all over again? Has this been a success for you? That's something that you can't do. You can't get this wide breadth of information from buying an existing business, for example. With franchising, you can you can talk to as many franchisees as you would like. So now we're going to move into, is it a myth or is it a fact? We all have, and I did as well before I got into franchising. Even though I worked with a lot of franchisees, I knew a lot of them that own very large national brands. But I still, you still have myths in your head, right? So I'll start with this one. Franchising is only fast food and retail. If anybody doesn't know this one, you guys weren't on the beginning of the call. So that is a myth, of course. As I hit on the demographics and how important it is to think through the demographics and the different types of businesses, I brought up different categories. There are over 4,000 different franchise companies in more than 90 industries. But for some reason, everybody always thinks of fast food, right, and retail. Okay, another one. Franchises succeed because of the quality of the product. That's a tougher one. To that, I always ask, can you make a better burger than a McDonald's burger? I would say yes, right? So is their food great? Well, maybe their French fries are great. That's probably the only thing I really like. But if it's not the product, what has led to their success? I mean, everybody can think of an example of a great business that closed. I certainly can. I have a couple of them. And I think, why didn't they survive? And you're kind of scratching your head. But the reality of it is that it's all about the business systems. That's what breeds success, right? It's the marketing, it's the sales, operations, accounting. I mean, I've been to with my husband to go to McDonald's when we're on a road trip. He likes their breakfast. And you walk in there and you see this long line, and you know that they're going to get through that pretty quickly. And then you look behind the counter and it's just extremely efficient. And they have perfected that over years. So those operations and that know-how and that experience and the expertise is really what's making a difference. Their know-how about marketing, sales, and that's what you're buying into when you're looking at franchising. You want to hear their expertise in marketing. How do they help the franchisees build their businesses and deliver clients to their franchisees? Operations, accounting, all of that. It's very important. So myth or fact, franchises are expensive? Not true. And this actually is the latest information because it doesn't change that much. But if you look at the different initial investment ranges, and I want to clarify this because when we say initial investment range, what we're talking about includes everything, the franchise fee, all the costs that it takes to get the business open, and also working capital for anywhere from 2 to 6 months. But that, of course, is detailed in there in the FDD. But if you look at it, there are some low cost franchises out there. I always kind of warn people, though, those lower cost businesses, I would say anywhere from 100 to 50, that investment is most likely going to be a home-based business. When it starts to go up in investment, that means there's usually, maybe it's a mobile business, there's vehicles, maybe you're hiring a manager because you want to keep your day job. That's when the costs go up, right? So something to think about. But one thing I always like to say is that there's really no automatic correlation between how much you invest in a franchise and that potential rate of return. A lot of times what we're finding is that there's just great businesses that are lower cost, service-based businesses that don't require that amount of capital and risk, but can really garner a much quicker return on your investment. Something to think about. So when I show that previous slide, people are thinking, okay, well, how much money do I need to come to the table with? And usually you want to factor about 25 to 30% of that total investment cash. And then the rest is relatively easy to finance. Sorry, I went the wrong way. So, of course, you can finance it through savings. If you have a partner, friends, or relatives that want to help you, a lot of people have been using the line of credit in their home. That we saw a lot during the pandemic when the interest rates are still really low, but the home values are going up. So a lot of people used during a time that a lot of people were afraid to start a business, right? They took advantage of that, and they were able to use that equity in their home to buy a business. Seller financing, if it's a resale, is an option. A lot of people don't know that you can use your 401k or IRA tax-free and penalty-free. Now, that is if you're not currently working at the business where that retirement fund is. But there is something called ROBS, Rollover for Business Startups, that the government started probably now almost 30 years ago. I had a client, one of my very first clients, that was told me he thought it was a scam, and he researched it and he came back and told me the history. So the government started this to fuel business ownership and create jobs. So this is something that a lot of our clients are using and have used over the years. It's not something that we do at FranNet, but I can certainly introduce you to companies that are very professional and happy to do that, happy to make that referral. We've worked with many of them over all the 30 years that we've been doing this, so very reputable companies, and that's important. But you can use that money actually to pay yourself a salary for the first year. It's an interesting program, a lot of information that I think is very valuable and some benefits. But again, not my area of expertise. We do a funding webinar that we'll be advertising. Every month we do one funding webinar, so you're welcome to join on that and ask any questions because there'll be people, experts that do that. So next myth or fact, you don't need industry experience. You don't. The reality of it is that franchisors, they have already developed a proven business model. And now they're going to teach you and train you how to use their systems that they've built. They really want someone who comes with other things that they can't teach. They want someone who is good at either managing people, managing P&Ls, good communicators, good salespeople, and every franchisor is different. And they have already identified the skills and that franchisee that would be the perfect fit, who has the best chance of success based on the role of the owner. And that's also something that we really talk about a lot with our clients, and we think is extremely important. Hyper focusing on what is the role of the business owner and how do you align with that. And at FranNet, we help you really identify those transferable skills, and then match you to the franchisors that are looking for people like that. So less than 25% of franchisees are in the industry that they were working in. And if you think about franchisors, they probably don't want you to have experience in their industry, because then you may not follow the process. And that's something that we found that a lot of times leads to not great success in franchising. People who get into a franchise and then don't follow the model and don't do what the franchisors know works and is successful. So yes, understanding what that role is of the business owner is crucial for success. Next one, successful franchisees emerge in new industries with no new competitors. People always want to know, what is that hot new franchise, right? That's not true. We have so many great franchisors and franchisees who've been very successful in industries that have lots of competition. They've gone into an industry where there's a lot of competitors, but they've still been able to be very successful. Competition is good. Franchisors go into areas where there's a lot of demand. They don't care if there's competition. What they're doing is they're providing a service a lot of times in industries where there's a lot of mom and pops and it's very fragmented, and they're building systems for franchisees to grow and scale quickly, to provide a professional service, to provide a professional look. And so that's where that growth really comes. And again, I go back to, McDonald's, if you think about it, when they first started, there was a burger joint on every corner, probably had better food and better service, but it did not stop them from growing and booming all over the United States, all over the world, right? Here are some examples of clients of mine who I can tell you none of them had experience in these industries. I have my client started Home Watch Caregivers, and he came to me after being very high up in his company, and he was during a downturn, and he told me he never wanted to retire, and he and his wife was actually looking to go back and get a job and actually go to college. She was going to take some classes. And so we met, got to know him and his wife and understand what his skills were. We looked at a couple of options, and they've been operating home watch caregivers for like 6 years now, I think it's been. They've been very successful. They have a team of over 50 employees. Loves it. Just met with them, I think it was last year. Early last year we met, and they're just having a great time and still growing, he said. And then we've got, then I have my client who was looking for something more semi-absentee, and it's so funny every time I talk to him. One time I was talking to him, and he's like, it was actually during the pandemic, and he was able to survive and do really well through it. And he said, one thing I love, he got a call on the phone when I was talking to him, and he had to deal with a gift card situation. And he's like, you know what I love? I love that I can walk into my salon and nobody knows I'm the owner. He was able to go to his home country for a month, and he said that they did not skip a beat. It's been, a lot of fun for him, and he really enjoys his business. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about. So my client down below, she has a really great story. Actually, I did some PR on her story, because she became a citizen, and the same week opened up her own business. And so, it's a really cool story. But her background also oil and gas. She was very high up, moved up very, very quickly. She wanted to be able to start something. She loved fitness. She really wanted a fitness business. And she wanted to be able to take her son to school and just have more of her life, and flexibility. And so she's been able to do that. She's had her business for, I guess, 3 or 4 years. And then, here's some other examples of people who did not have any experience in what they did. I've got my clients that own fitness machine technicians, and what they do. It's really interesting. He was able to keep his job. He wanted to retire from his government job, and he was able to do that. I think this month, was it last month or this month? And now he's focusing on his business full time. But he was able to run it semi-absentee, keep his day job. And what his business does is they provide where they fix fitness machine equipment, but they have like monthly services. So he sells kind of like a membership, but that's not the word I'm looking for. Subscription, I think, is more appropriate. And he got the Dynamos account. He got that, I think, his second year in business. So he does the gym for the Dynamos. Gotcha covered. My client also, came to me. He was laid off. He ended up getting a job, and then he came back to me going, I am sure I do not want to be in corporate America anymore. So he's been operating his business, Gotcha Covered, in the Woodlands for quite some time now. I lose track, but just, that's a home-based business. Several of these are home-based businesses. Blue Moon Estate Sales, who'd have thought? That is in franchising. She started her business, has done extremely well. Something that when we were meeting, she had a lot of relationships with real estate agents. And so that's something that she was able to transfer into estate sales. So good referral clients for her. But just some examples of people that I've worked with, help them really hone in on what their transferable skills are, their investment range, the time commitment. There's just a lot to factor in to make sure that people are successful. That's the goal. So franchising is basically, it's a model. It's a way to grow and scale a business. They have a proven concept. They have that experience. Hopefully they have franchising experience. I tell people that's extremely important. Make sure if you find a franchise on your own, that they have experience in growing a successful franchise, whether it's the one that you're looking at or a previous one. They have the training and support, name recognition, operational systems, sales, marketing, and there's that culture of teamwork. I've had clients tell me, one of the benefits is the support that they get from other franchisees. And not only that, but the buying power. There's a huge advantage to that, especially when you're operating in the local market and you're competing against mom and pops. Huge advantage there. Now we talked about royalties. I can tell you that it was one of the biggest sticking points for me, and I know and I can relate to that with my clients as well. But something to keep in mind is, first of all, good franchisors lose money in the short term. When you pay that franchise fee, there's a lot of human capital, time investment that goes into supporting a new franchisee. There's training at the headquarters. They may be coming into the local market. They may be paying for a coach to meet with you every week. There's a lot. There's probably phone calls on a daily basis for help and support. So there's a lot that good franchise companies are doing to make sure that their franchisors are well trained. And they know that in the long run, that's when they're going to make money. When you first start a franchise, the sales are low and the royalties are a percentage of gross sales typically. And so as you grow your business, the royalty payments actually become larger as your sales go up. And the support costs go down because there's not as much time invested. So they make money over the long run, not just for one. I mean, it needs to be multiples, right? That's when they start making money. So I always tell my clients that, and this is how I see it now, for a franchisor to be successful, they've got to be very good at helping their franchisees grow and scale. They don't make more money unless their franchisees are making more money. So how do they grow? A franchisor grows by supporting their franchisees to be more and more and more successful. All right, so in franchising, you're in business for yourself, but you're not by yourself, and that's huge. One thing that I think is really important is not to do this on your own. We at Franet have done this for years, and we have a process and a system that we help our clients uncover what would be that best franchise fit. And the first thing we start with is something called the assessment, entrepreneurial profile, the EP. And it's free. There's no obligation if you want to take it, and it feels like a personality test because it is, but it's going to evaluate your values, your motives, your core competencies. It really is eye-opening when it comes to my clients, understanding what would be a good fit for them, what business model would be a good fit, but also for us as well. So Franet helps with this. We start with this assessment. We help you establish your best criteria. And once we get this assessment, we're going to go through building that ideal business and forcing our clients to really think through what would be that perfect fit business. And so we're going to talk through the employees. Have you managed people? How many employees do you want? What types of employees? Budget, not just your budget for buying the business, but your budget for maintaining your household as you grow and scale your business over that first year. What business environment are you comfortable in? You know, some people are really comfortable in wearing a golf shirt with their company logo, no problem. And some feel like they need to get dressed up and wear a business attire to feel good about, you know, going to work and being the face of their business. Are you wanting full or part-time? And that's really more, are you ready for full-time engagement in your franchise? Or do you want to start on a part-time basis, maybe more semi-absentee? And there's a lot to talk through when we work with clients who are currently working and finding those areas where they have time to grow something on a semi-absentee basis. I'm looking at the time. Okay, we're doing okay. Number of units, do you want 1, 2? Are you wanting to grow an empire? All of those things are really important. The types of customers, business to business, business to consumer. Do you want a service or a product? Are you okay with a mobile business going into people's homes? Do you want a franchise that is extremely established, Are you comfortable with maybe a new and emerging franchise? And there's never a right or a wrong answer, but we're really thinking through all these aspects before we go and we find those franchises that are a right fit. Room for growth, other items. Something I talk about with my clients. I had somebody that wanted to buy a yogurt shop, open Monday through Sunday until 10 o'clock at night, weekends till 11. And, that's what she wanted to do. But she had young kids that she was wanting to put her kids to bed every night at, 7 o'clock. And, the weekends were family time for her. So we talked about that. Does that really make sense for you? Is that the right fit business? And so talking through these things are really helpful, I think, for our clients to fine tune what would be the right fit, and that is all what leads to success. Talking about what your skills are, what do you do in your corporate job? What are you naturally really good at? Are you creative? Are you good at coming up with marketing ideas? Do you enjoy that? Are you good at selling, going out and networking and talking to people about what your business does or not? And again, these are things that matter. There are some franchisors that tell us, Cindy, we need somebody who has background in sales. Those people are successful. Don't bring me anybody who doesn't have that because they don't work. Or fill in the blank. There's so many different scenarios, but franchisors know what skills that they're wanting. And what we do when we work with clients is we help people kind of really think through that. What are your skills? What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy problem solving? Are you good at working with customers or not? Are you really good at operations and following systems? Are you good at managing people? Do you have experience managing people? Are you good at a P&L, managing the P&Ls? Whatever you are good at, we want to talk through those things and build those skills that you're good at. And then match that to the franchise that is looking for that in a successful owner. What is your exit strategy? Not just thinking through what do you want your financial goals and your lifestyle goals to be year 1, year 5, 10, 20. Are you thinking about growing something and then selling it into retirement or running it into retirement? There could be businesses that are better suited for one or the other. Some businesses are better as building into an asset for sale versus others. So those are things to really think through and identify those before you go into business. We also have additional resources. We help our clients through the due diligence process, and we know at the time that they're ready to hire a franchise attorney. That's extremely important. But there's no need to spend money on that until the time is right. So we help clients understand when to bring in those professional advisors or accountants. Here's some great books that if you're interested in doing some research on your own, Street Smart Franchising is a really good one. I love eMyth Revisited for anybody who's looking to start a business because it really focuses on those systems and how to grow and scale without you being involved in every piece of it. That's crucial for success. So if you're interested and you're ready to take the leap, we think the very first thing and most important is to start that. Well, first to hear this information, but then secondly, to take the assessment. And if you're working with me or Diana, I will put this screen up here. This is my number and Diana's contact information. Certainly feel free to take the link that you see there. You can also use your phone to scan and then we'll be able to send you and shoot you the information from there. But we also will do a follow-up. So that's all I have today. I am so sorry if you could hear my dog barking in the background. Oh, he doesn't usually do this. I don't know what's going on. But what I would like to do is open it up to any questions. I've covered all the information. If there's any questions that you have, please type them into the chat box or into the Q&A. I will be looking at that here. Any questions at all that I didn't cover? Feel free to type them in. don't see any yet. All right. Well, looks like I covered it, but certainly do not hesitate to reach out to either of us. We are here to support you in your journey, to answer any questions, even if you're not ready right now, and you want to talk through, what it might look like in the future, whatever the case may be. We're here in Houston, and we really have a good eye on what's going on, who's growing, um, and all that fun stuff. So, well, thank you, thank you. I am going to stop for now because I don't see any questions coming through, but thank you so much for all your time, and have a great rest of your afternoon. Bye-bye.